there were probably some of the chairs. We probably picked it up when she was and they were on the seats. So everyone in the chair should have a mic.
We want to get underway with a traditional opening of our people that we call Ohandu Galiwadekwa. In our Ganyangeha Mohawk language, it means the words that come before all else. And we say this greeting as a way to acknowledge the natural world, and it situates human beings, the people who we call Ungwasu'a, among all of the living things, not above or below, but a part of it. And our clan mother, Louise, Wakérakats, is going to share Ohandu Galiwadekwa with us all.
Sego, das war der Hossiost. Onigi wahi a gahiwachi ni gahawi guanada, honigi a dwali wana dugana, Ohandu Galiwadekwa. Tananegi wahi and Yitsununya now, Gwego Ugwet Sua, got to Zwadawi at the Nasquaja Dahla, say, Negi I dwali waga oya, Negi ne Naiji the Wile, Jini Guanacdo, the Neganto, Yukinistan Huja, Hiloquet Nage. I out ski scana didawa, Sudohetste, Ganigulia, Yedawatste, Tanane, Oni, Gasat Stansla, Ezo Yunguada, the Tanane, Oni, Ezoganal Quatsla. Negi wahi, etonu, you're getting Gulayela, Dagwega, the Kenhaladan, and the Hodagana, Lily Hwayantan, and Suguayat Diza, Etoget Nue, at Kadasa, and Yukinistan Huja, Toget you to Hakni Guani Gula. Tanane, the Kenhaladan, and Guja Sua, Toget you to Hakni Guani Gula. Tanane oni de kenhalada negi wahi ne nega suan jini got the last swio jisego ganegio the one got sonya sigo hat the now se toget ni to hakni gwani gola. Tanane oni de kenhalada nego jo suan toget ni to hakni gwani gola. Tanane oni at the case de kenhalada negi wahi ne gwen hodat ganius ne hunjage negi wahi ne gatni hundessa ohunde suan you gwanukwa suan o dela suan Gayantosala, honest, there was a head that Tana Ona Ozla, a toget new to Hakni Guani Gola. Tana Oni, Tanquadia, getting go Hayela, did the Kenhalada, Negi Wahine, Ojino Watsua, Oga get on Hunjaguso, Oga get Ola Gesso, Tanane Oni, Oglala Sua, Wata Jinika Guilodo, Tanane Oni, Ojidon Go, Arguix, Jini Hosanodo, toget new to Hakni Guani Gola. Tanane oni tanagadi again Hatueyael at the Jitkalonhiade, Negi wahi de Kenawalado, Negi wahi ne Yeti Sotago and Ladi Welas. Tanane oni Gayeli Nigawalage, Toget New Duhak Niuguatnigola. Tanane oni de Kenawalado, Negi wahi La Wela Digini, Ayulakwalage, Negi wahi Chiduachi, Agyoke, Nekagalaka, Ezogas at Stansla Disagwawi, Sanane oni Yuki Sota, Asunta Nekagalaka, Toget New Duhak Niuguatnigola. Tanane oni ne tonogwadi the kenhalada ne ojistanogwa sua gayeli new gwedage toget new duhak new gwani gola. Tanane oni the kenhalada nege wahi yuki suta oji jizo nege wahi jit kalonhia galo de jigoya dan tanaganto jigoha ne yugwa duhanets tanane oni ne yugwa naha sua tanajini gwadala suio jisego de wagalayan daily toget new duhak new gwani gola. Tanane oni the Hinholada, Negi wahi Sugua Diz and Eloadele and Oji Jizo. Negi wahi Jinu got the last wheel, Jisego Suguana Lucone, Loguet that Sua, Ne Ogohua, Tananegi, Wahinelo, the Wiana, Uguas Guislo, Ne IG the Wounded, Tanane oni, Ne IG the Wayandal and Jinigua, Satstan Salodo, Tanane oni, Jinigua and Dansalodo. Negi wahi what the Kinu what Tino Holada, Giaguego say. Na hoda disagwawi se toget ni tu hakni gwani gola. Negi wahi wat gelagats de yungats wak skalewa ge gani stosla ya goyane jinue wagadeli hande jinu jinigasanoda de hana galine yugwaskalewa ge tana jinu wagadeli wat gwenyo wageli wana dunga nuo wahni zalade gatana so getni gola easy get wahi yojizwa da sundala tana negi wahi diswadan walada. Toget ni duhak ni gwani gola.
Now, Louise, we're going to start this session with a song of welcome to you, a song of our people called Kaiele Niongwedege.
These words, Skaeli Niungwedeke, she just mentioned in the Thanksgiving, for the four beings at the four directions of the universe, our protectors, our energies, and in each of our lives, we have the number 4 resonating in our biology and in our being. So however you relate to these 4 corners of the universe, you can join our thought to ask them to help us, to help our families. Kaeli niungweda ke wanduka askoyana wase sayata nuna ne akwachile awanduka askoyana wase yo hana yo e ahe yo hana yo e ahe yo hayo hana yo e ahe yo hana yo e ahe kaeli niungweda ke wanduka askoyana wase sayata nuna ne akwajile awanduka askoyana wase yo hana yo e ahe yo hana yo e ahe yo hayo hana yo e ahe yo hana yo e ahe Nyakoa.
Yawagoa. Kwa yoyanale, we say. That was beautiful. Yawa. So next we'll hear from Eric Gullickson from Mohawk Mountain House. Welcome, Eric.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good to see you. It's nice to see some familiar faces and also new faces. As mentioned, my name's Eric Gullickson. I'm one member of the Smiley family. My role here is the president of the Mohawk Mountain House, the resort operation. And on behalf of our family, it's an honor to be with all of you here today for this event. Been doing some work with consultations to get to this day, and it seems to me that the work and this effort of this book is at this time in the world, in the political and social sphere, is ever more important than in my short life, when there's so much division in this world, and this type of compassion and healing, it becomes more and more important as time goes by. So I wanted to really thank all of you and really thank Consultations for making the effort, and starting with my grandfather, Keith Smiley, and my mother, Sandra Smiley, and now today, Louisa, Finn, and Patty Madison in their leadership roles with Mohawk Consultations, and all the board members who have carried on the tradition of allowing for this type of dialogue and opportunity. And so with that, once again, I just look very forward to learning more today and then ever forward. Thank you. And Patty.
Some of us are tall and some of us are short. Hi, I'm Patty Madison. I'm one of the 4th generation of Smileys here at Mohawk. You can't hear me? Sorry, I'll stand in front of it. That might help. Okay. And I'd like to talk a little bit about Mohawk consultations. Eric, my cousin, just mentioned his grandfather, Keith Smiley, who was one of the founders of Mohawk consultations in 1980. And Keith was a good Quaker. He lived his Quaker values actively. He hosted lots of conferences and discussions here at Mohawk to encourage living in harmony with Earth and to bring about peace in the world. We all know how important that is. In 1963, Hannah's brother, Daniel Smiley, founded, can you hear? No? Shall I shout? Okay. They founded the Mohawk Preserve, what became the Mohawk Preserve. And today, it's over 8,500 acres, and it's a nonprofit nature preserve that surrounds the hotel. We're all so lucky. And what I mean by we is it's not just lucky for people, but it's lucky for all the other beings, the species, the animals who live here on this nature preserve or with this nature preserve. We're talking about the birds such as osprey, the herons, the peregrine falcons, the eagles have come back, and then there's mammals who have come back like the coyotes and the beavers. There's otters, bears, fishers, raccoons, possums, squirrels, chipmunks, and lots of deer. Be careful while you're driving. And then, of course, there's the fish and the reptiles and the amphibians and insects. Very important. Keith Smiley followed Robert Greenleaf's words of wisdom in that he wanted to be he believed in servant leadership. In other words, as Keith would put it, he led from behind. And that was part of the mission statement that became for Mohawk Consultations. And that was, Consultations was founded in 1980. But part of that whole set of values was that he believed that people were an integral part of the whole environment. That you can't just say, oh, well, people are completely separate from the rest of the world. The environment, the animals, the birds, and so forth, the wind, the waters, the soils. So he wanted to get things done with enduring benefits to all. And that also included reconciliation and consensus building. So the Mohawk mission statement reads as follows. Our purpose is to help bring about a clearer understanding of the interrelationship of all life on Earth, emphasizing the need for sustainable use of the Earth's resources, including the human community, and to support the development of practical means to do so. I'd like to also tell you about the power of stories for me, because this gathering is about a book, a very powerful book of these people's stories. My mother, Rachie, always told my sister Rachel and I of stories of creatures and sprites that lived here at Mohawk. A crocodile lived under the east porch, in the pipe that fed the hydraulic elevator system. So there was gurgling, there was bubbling, there was belching in the water under the porch. And then there was a fairy home in a large oak tree down in the chestnut oak grove, right below the house. There was a huge bowl in the tree. We could peek into it. It was low to the ground. I mean, Rachie was born here in 1920, so if she didn't know where the fairies lived, nobody knew where the fairies lived. And here, too, is what author, Laguna Pueblo, of Laguna Pueblo descent, Leslie Marmon Silko, said about stories. She said, "I will tell you something about stories. They aren't just entertainment. Don't be fooled. They are all we have, you see, all we have to fight off illness and death." She put that in her novel Ceremony that came out in 1977. One other thing she said about stories: the only way to get change is not through the courts or, heaven forbid, the politicians, but through a change of human consciousness and through a change of heart. Only through the arts, music, poetry, dance, painting, and writing can we reach each other. So, in the 1990s, at the University of Colorado at Boulder, I focused my doctoral dissertation on 19th century American women's stories that focused on love, marriage, and family relationships between, and I'm calling it, in quotes, whites and Indians at this point. My study included some nonfiction, like captivity narratives and polemic essays. But most of the stories were novels that were published in the 19th century in America. After that, I went on to teach the very first Native American literature classes at Southern Utah University before returning to Mohawk and having the gift of living with my mother, Rachie, for another 7 years. So I know that this brand new book, Worlds Within Us, is a groundbreaking, powerful, and even a sacred vessel. I mean, that's what it is to me with these stories. I won't cry yet, quite yet. It's unlike any other book yet published, as far as I know. It's an interweaving of our speakers' stories and memories of their families and places, not only full of hardship and histories, but also full of inspired hope, and most of all, strength and healing. So I am grateful for the women in my family, going all the way back to my great-great-grandmother, Effie Smiley, who was married to Daniel Smiley, my great-great-grandfather. And then there's the three Rachels, the sequential generations. My grandmother, Rachel, who came to Mohawk in approximately 1918 and played the organ and the piano every single day until we lost her in 1993. My mother, Rachie, a lot of people in here remember Rachie. She gave lots of tours of the house, and she was inexhaustibly optimistic and full of joy. And then finally, there's my sister Rachel, who's here today, thank goodness. And she is a very strong person, to say the least. So at this point, I'd like to introduce José Barreiro, who is a Cuban-born novelist, essayist, journalist, and activist. He resides on the Aquinnase Reservation in northern New York State, and he has been devoted to sociocultural issues and the defense and well-being of indigenous peoples of the American hemisphere for the last 40 years. He served as professor of Native American Studies at Cornell University and director of the Office for Latin America at the Smithsonian National Museum of the American Indian. He was also senior editor of Indian Country Today and the magazine Native Americas. He has published hundreds of articles in magazines, newspapers, anthologies, newsletters, and specialized publications on the subject. I'm going to turn over the program now to José. So, José, do you want to come up?
That was way more role than I expected, actually, and much more of a bio. Thank you, Mohawk people, Smiley family, for your effort, for putting this wonderful event together. And I want to take a second to thank the publisher of the book, Mario Picayo, and 1E Press, and Raquel Picayo as well, who made this possible. Not only the book, but this event. So briefly, I think we always benefit from events and things in our lives that coalesce, that cohere, that somehow signal each other. And in our way, in our home, probably the most important piece of my biography for this event is that I'm Gaji's husband. So, in our way, we had the opportunity to walk through many Native traditions, and some really took hold in our lives. And Gaji's work in midwifery, the Maya tradition of the calendar, sacred calendar of the Maya. So we follow that, and in this day, today is the Deer Day. It's the Day of the Deer, the Kich. And the Kich represents, among many other things, leadership, the deer horns and the leadership of the deer in the animal life and in our spiritual life. And the deer represents leadership, and I think it's wonderful that we're here about a leadership group, a tremendous leadership group of elders. As my wife likes to remind me, it's not elder women, it's women elders. So they're legacy leaders, that's what they're called, the 8 that contribute to the book. And so it coalesces the idea of leadership. And I think all of us need to always look for our best leadership to put forward. Briefly, there's a history to this place, a long history. Wonderful things have happened here with the Smiley family. And there's a history also that is questionable from an early time in American history, when the Native policies of the United States were being thought about for what was going to go into the 20th century for Native people in North America, and specifically in the United States. And there were talks held here about that. Like there were talks held here about many things. Positive things came out of it. In the context of American Indian people, it was quite negative. The policy that came out of it, the thinking that led to legislation was quite harmful, severely harmful to the people. And what was wrong with that meeting? There was not nearly enough true Native voice in that meeting to talk about the real needs of Native people in 1900, in 1890, in the 1880s. Now we have Native voices, elder voices, people who have worked tirelessly for their communities, because every one of these authors, these 8 authors, joined the book because each of them had rescued something of their culture, of their life, of this thing that was torn asunder by very directed, very ill-directed policy toward Native people. Caused a lot of death, and still causing death because of the disruption of the family, the disruption of the landholding. But now we have a turnaround, and that's the hope. There are Native voices, strong Native voices in this room, and of the women's leadership, which currently is the leadership of the Native world, of the healing that needs to go on within our world and with the world at large. Thank you.
Yawa for those words. Yawa. So good afternoon. My name is Randi Barreiro. I'm a member of the Mohawks of Akwesasne Wolf Clan. I am part of this book because I was the project coordinator for a Spirit-Aligned Leadership Program, which was the brilliant idea that brought these women elders together. I've been a student of Gaji, Louise, Loretta ever since I first met them. And no matter what my bio says in that catalog you have in your hands, the best thing I ever did was ask Gaji Cook at the mall, "How's your son doing in college?" So that, I did not know then, but it was the best thing I ever did. Because I get to sit around a table and have these conversations. We were sitting around a table last night having these conversations and just remarking that this is our real life. This is the life we live. It's not a performance or a show. What we share here today, we're sharing out of friendship with you, pieces of our real lives. So I'm very proud and grateful to have been part of this extraordinary leadership project. As a granddaughter who was very close to my grandmother's, it was such a gift and a blessing to me. So now we have this wonderful book, which is doing what the program of Spirit-Aligned Leadership set out to do, was to elevate the lives and the experiences and the voices of Indigenous women elders. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speakers today. But before I do that, I wanted to acknowledge the rest of the authors here, acknowledge the other legacy leaders of Spirit-Aligned Leadership, Circle 1. So I won't go in order, but not present here today is Dr. Henrietta Mann, who's a Southern Cheyenne, Nora Naranjo Morse, Kapo Awinge, Jan Longboat, Kanyankahaga of Six Nations of the Grand River, Sarah James, Gwichin, Yvonne Dupuy Peterson, Chehalis, and Barbara Poley, Laguna Hopi. Who's that? So the ones who are here today with us, we're fortunate to have Loretta Afraid of Bear Cook and Louise Herne, Wakérakats. So I'd like to introduce Loretta Afraid of Bear Cook to you all. From the book, you'll learn Loretta is among the gems of the Indigenous traditional world. She's a natural inheritor of her Lakota people's extensive knowledge and a fluent speaker of their ancient language. Loretta is individually endowed with extraordinary memory, curiosity, intelligence. She's a noble woman elder bundled in the high character and guidance of her master teachers. Her community and cultural world is an important core foundation of the extensive traditional world of the Lakota, Nakota, Dakota kinship that extends throughout the Great Plains of the United States and Canada. Loretta is at the forefront of contemporary movement on the central cultural issue of her people, which is the resolution of use and ownership of Pahasapa, the sacred Black Hills. She possesses mastery over all of the ceremonial rituality associated with the tradition of the sacred pipe, sundance, and other spiritual practices that promote unity. Wakérakats, Louise Herne, is a traditionalist leader and consistent innovator who illuminates the journey of her people to regenerate love for themselves, their children, and their ancestral culture. Her lifelong home community is the Akwesasne Mohawk Reservation, which straddles the US-Canadian border on the St. Lawrence River in northern New York, southern Ontario. A Bear Clan mother in the traditional longhouse, she pulls the threads of ancient matrilineal knowledge from Sky Woman's original legacy to the present. Louise activates ceremony as a way of being and knowing over the entire life course. It's truly a pathway away from violence and abuse, from illness to health. Over a decade, she has led young people and their relations through Ohologo, a 4-year rite of passage to contemplate and steadily incorporate Haudenosaunee values that will guide them as adults. And with them is our editor, Tsia'kwa Cook, who many know as Gudgy Cook. She is also a Wolf Clan of the Mohawk Nation. She's an Ungwehue midwife, elder, and executive director of Spirit Aligned Leadership Program. She also resides in Akwesasne. She's a member of the St. Regis Mohawk tribe. Gudgy's work spans many worlds and disciplines and demonstrates a lifelong career of advancing the cultural superlatives of Indigenous knowledge. She's an advocate of Indigenous women's health across the life cycle, drawing from a longhouse traditionalist perspective, the idea that woman is the first environment. Gudgy works at the intersections of environmental reproductive health and justice, research and policy. Gudgy's body of work connected health research, scientists, community health professionals, and community members. Her groundbreaking environmental research of Mohawk mother's milk revealed the harmful intergenerational impact of industrial chemicals and contamination on the health and well-being of our community. And with Spirit Aligned Leadership Program, she continues her lifelong advocacy of Indigenous midwifery and health through all of our communities in North America. So please welcome them. So just a bit about the book before I join them over there in that chair. Worlds Within Us was started as a smaller project, but how can you hear some of the stories that they had to tell and not immediately elevate them and start to dream bigger? It's not simply an anthology or a compilation of disparate Indigenous voices that you might have seen in the bookshelves, all valuable for sure, but this is not that. These women, as part of Spirit Aligned Leadership, were intentionally put together to connect with each other over their common care and concern for their communities, and as well as their lifelong bodies of work. They connected with each other and shared a sisterhood, and I like how Gudgy says it, they became a group of connected knowers. And so over the course of their time together, they really began to open up to each other and trust each other. And these conversations that were ongoing for 2 or 3 or 4 years, we started to collect those, and in the course of that, unlocked a lot of memories, and they really came to be happy to share these stories. And so just small pieces of those are in the book that you're holding today. So I'm going to join you all. Get all my papers. So Loretta, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, yes, I can.
Loretta, why don't you share a little bit of reading from the book?
Thank you. Thank you all for being here to hear our stories, and I invite you in. I stand in my truth. White Buffalo Calf Woman brought the 7 sacred rights of the women, but told us we were to share our gifts, her teachings with the men. After 200 years of colonization and persecution, some of these ways have been lost to some of the people. They could go to jail for practicing them. I am old enough to remember having uncles and grandfathers being taken to jail. So now it's my job to teach our ways again lovingly. I feel privileged to have known major teachers among my people and culture. And following their deep instructions, I have lived many revealing and instructive experiences. Not a few adventures, many heartbreaks, and countless uplifting moments. I am excited about connecting with other Indigenous women. Collectively, we are the thread and the weavers of social transformation in our communities. Working together and sharing ceremonial space with women is not luck or coincidence. It is clear to me that it is meant to be, that our cultures in power intensifies when we come together in prayer. It is important that the work we get involved in is documented so the teachings that come from it are accessible. In my Lakota culture, every leader of the Tioshpai had winter counts. They reference significant events within a given time period. These recordings supplemented our oral traditions in history and helped to mark our journey together as people. I envision the legacy of our women leaders. There are many ways of continuing this important practice. The more culture bearers open their hearts and minds, the more accessible the knowledge inside becomes. To those who are seeking this path, the values I adhere to, courage, generosity, humility, love for our people, make transference of knowledge, cultural survival, and social transformation possible. This is the only way to move forward together and intact. My elder relatives held the same values and lived the same purpose, and now I'm in position to apply it for our people because of what I learned from them. As my grandfather, George Sword, a medicine man, said, "These things are for us to give, they're not for us to keep." This is the truth that I have stood in all of my life. I was walking through the hallway. To go and eat, and it's been so awesome, so wonderful that the family, the Smiley family, have accorded us profound respect. And one of the ways that you attain respect and good feeling, goodwill with each other is through food. And they have done that for us these last few days, these last few meals that we've had. They've been tremendous. We've been nourished, and we receive the holiness from that food. So I want to say thank you for that. You made us feel special, and you brought us in to sit with all of you relatives out here. I want to thank each and every one of you for coming and being here with us to hear our story. More importantly, I want to stand in another truth, and that is, I was born at a very early age. You know, and so we all have that truth. And the other part of that is that there were some things that we have to say to lighten the mood. And I was walking to lunch today, and I witnessed or got to see pictures of old people. And in there, I saw there was a man who was here, and we were talking about the meetings that were held here to determine Indian policy among our people. And one of those policies in 1883 was the Code of Indian Offenses. And that was one of the things that put us to a place where we could not practice our ways without going to jail, without anything. It demolished our people. So today, we followed that patterning. We looked at that. And in 1887, the Dawes Act that came along and took our native lands. And it gave it to religious orders, to 160 acres to manage and to take over and to teach us what was it they said? To bring us into a white standard of culture and religious practice. And so, knowing these things, these were some of the things that people say to you when they think they're doing the best thing for you, and that's always going to be their excuse. And so, we've learned very early on, we were born, I think, with empathy, I think, in our traditions, because that is how we're brought up as Native people, as children. We're foundational, we're following foundational teachings. And within that, I recognize that when we were following these things and looking at, in 1978, the American Indian Religious Freedom Act came to be. So we were allowed, again, to come back in. We came back into the circle, and I'd like to say that from that time to 1994, it had some amendments. But we've only come back in the last 45 years. And so within that time frame, we've learned to extend the respect that we have for every nation of man. And we wear medicine wheels on our heads. You see what I have on my head. What it makes known to the world is that I am a person that I accept all of life in its entirety. And we're born that way. We're born to learn how to talk respectfully. We don't just make light about things. When we talk to you from our hearts. And so we're not going to sugarcoat it. We're not going to say any of those things, but we talk to you with respect. We do not want to make anybody feel untoward at any point in time. And I think our language, even my language, when I say to you, mitakuye oyasi, it means all my relations. And on this medicine wheel, you see that there are 4 quarters, there are 4 corners. It's our way is to the west. The thunder and lightning reside there. The next is to the north. And the Buffalo people are 405 grandfathers and grandmothers reside there. And then to the east, the black-tailed deer resides there, and the man who paints himself yellow and comes every day. And then to the south, we acknowledge those that fly, Anunkasa, which is the bald eagle. And within that context of it, it looks like there's a cross in the center, but it's actually a man holding his arms out, or a woman holding her arms out, holding the world together. And those are some of the foundational teachings that we give to our little ones. And we recognize that teaching, reteaching, regenerating, re-educating our people was at the heart of standing our people back up. Because some of us came through those tumultuous years, even though we were being thrown to jail, we still speak the language. My family was one of those ones that went underground. They kept the ways, they kept the ceremonies, they kept the songs, they kept the rituals. So we had to start again. So 45 years, we've come back out. My husband and I, he's a Sundance leader. I'm the Sundance leader's wife. And so together, we have brought our children and our grandchildren, and now our great-grandchildren. And so they come into Sundance. We have 7 sacred ceremonies. Sundance is the most important one of our ceremonies. And these 7 sacred ceremonies, we started to reteach our families. In these past 45 years, we have rites of passage. For the female, it's called Ishnoti, learning to be alone. Ishnoti, learning to live alone, learning to be resilient, to be resolute. That's what Ishnoti means. And for the male, it's Hothokaja, and it means changing of his voice. He becomes a young man. And so we prepare these rites of passage for them, so we build their medicine bundles. We're building their medicine bundles, so they're not going to be any old which way in the world. There's certain things that go into those bundles. The women, we have what's called toss the ball. And in that, the ball represents the earth. The women own everything. And men are our gifts, and so we revere the men and we take care of them. And so we're going to make certain that they have a place at all times. When White Buffalo Calf Woman brought us these 7 sacred ceremonies, she said, you take them, you teach them to your gifts, the men. And so that's what we were doing today. And so within that context of it, Tapa Wankaliayapi means tossing the ball or throwing of the ball. It's this ball that is made of buffalo hide and buffalo hair, and she faces all the directions. We call the community together and we announce her. Here she is. She's entering this womanhood now, and she tosses the ball. And everybody that catches it is engaged in the commitment to work together so that your building of your relationships is strong. And so that's how we teach these young women, we teach these young boys how to do whatever it is to do to bring food to your table. All of these things, we teach them about what's on that medicine wheel. Inipi, most of you probably know, means sweat lodge. We go in for purification. We purify our minds, our hearts, our bodies. And when you come out of there, you're new again. Hamblechiapi, vision quest. You're crying for a vision. What is the vision? Some of our great leaders depend on the dreams of our people to know what to do next. Where are we going to go next? And it's done with honor and with dignity, integrity. Sundance, I told you, is the most important ceremony of my people. So it's a time of gathering to dance 4 days without food and water. Used to be we were a strong people. Today we're not. So we have a Sundance that lasts 4 days, and therein we make relatives. So I want to share that with you because I want to invite the Stanley family to come to Sundance. I would like to invite this family to come to Sundance and to be with us. We do that at summer solstice. So 17th of June is always the tree day. 18, 19, 20, and 21 are dance days. We never change that. It doesn't matter if the calendar moves ahead. We never change it. It's always those same days. So we honor the coming of that time. My husband has gifts to accompany to our sister Patty, and we're giving her the book of ceremony to accompany sister-in-law, her book, Our Stories. So the second truth I want to tell you is I want you to buy this book. I want to say to you that the last of these, or the second to the last, is hunkapi. Hunkayapi means chosen relatives. I get to choose my relatives, and sometimes you need that allyship. You need that friendship. You need somebody other than your own family, blood family, to stand with and to do things with you. And so that's one of our 7 sacred rites. And the last of these is Nurigluha Manipi. It's keeping of your ancestors' souls, keeping of them, the souls. It takes us 1 year to walk through. And when you lose a loved one, you know how badly it hurts. And it hurts even onto your throat. And so there's a ceremony we do, wiping of the tears, and we bring you back into the circle. And we clean your ears out, and we bless your throat so that that pain you have from crying for your loved one, it dissipates. It's still there. At a moment's notice, you can still fall into tears, and that's humanness. That's who we are. But we have all of our relatives all intact. We have those that fly, those that are in the water, those that are on the earth and in the earth, and the two-legged, all of us. So We are all relatives. So thank you, Patty, for mentioning that the mission, in your mission statement, you mentioned about the relatives. It's important that we take time to even notice the little bugs that walk on the earth. These are all part of it. We Sundance in a place, and when the snakes start to come into that area, it's time to change. They want their habitat back. So we have to be respectful about everything we're doing. We have to be respectful about how we talk. So I want to say about that much. Wopila, wopila.
So I wanted to ask Louise to speak a little and tell us about the world that you come from. You are a clan mother. I'd like you to share with our friends here, what does that mean to you? What does it mean for our community?
That women are in charge.
The long version.
Well, you know, it's not so much that women are in charge, but they're foundational to not just the spiritual life, but the political life. And, you know, being Haudenosaunee and being a Kanien'kehá:ka Mohawk woman and being a third generation Bear Clan mother, because my mother and my grandmother were also clan mothers, it's a tremendous responsibility to uphold. And I don't take it lightly. And, you know, we're not a program, we're a daily living, breathing culture that's in constant motion and in a state of survival. But I'm hoping that we're beyond the survival and that now we're getting to this better place, and not just as a mother and a grandmother within our community. I think living within a matrilineal society is very foundational. And as we're on the cusp of voting in the first woman president, I think it's very it's very timely and in synchronicity with the world that is changing right before our very eyes. And you know, being a clan mother within our community, it's not an easy job, but it's an important job. And my life work is dedicated to the voices of women, because I believe that women who are silent live in violence. And there has been a lot of violence in our community. And through these fantabulous women that I sit with up here, it's helped me to find my own voice and to also project it onto the next generation. And I'm super proud of the women that sit in my company, and I always am super floored by how smart our young women are. And even my young granddaughter, who tells me I talk too much. But you know, it's a good time to be alive, but we're also preparing for a very transitional world. And I think that our only option right now on this planet is unity. And the division can no longer exist. And as much as I hang on to my own bitterness about what has happened to our people, I'm working real hard to get over that. And I'm also, like Sister Loretta here, believe that knowledge ain't yours until you share it. And we're now in such a new time. And I believe that the Alliance of Women, if I can take the opportunity to read my little, I think I clipped it there. I also want to give a shout out to my sexy husband over here. My daughters always accuse me, they call me a feminist. Like, I'm not a feminist, I'm the law. And my husband's so patient with me when I say that. But anyways, I'm just gonna read a small chapter out of my contribution to this book. And it's called The Alliance of Women. In all cultures, women are overlooked for positions of power. If we diminish the female power, then it brings a lack of nourishment and nurturing for the future generations. I'm about empowering women to return to the positions of prominence. I'm devoted to that, especially in young Indigenous women. Eventually, we are going to leave, and someday they're going to take over. If we don't give them our love and attention, we handicap them, especially in terms of reproducing a culture and a language, so we help them rise. We're all sent into this life with something powerful to give. We encourage them to embrace their own individuality and their gift. As women, we must return a place of prominence, empowerment. That's where my passion lies. I want to someday know that I've impacted young women to lead their own generation into a future that absolutely belongs to them. I've always had the vision of a global alliance of powerful women of different nations converging to create a ceremony together for the protection of our Mother Earth. All of us coming to the original essence of a woman deity, like the Haudenosaunee Sky Woman, our White Buffalo Calf Woman, ever-changing woman. Women from all over the world gather to remember our stories of origin and life, and lifting ourselves through ceremony into a better state of consciousness. We are grappling with the many issues at this moment: a pandemic, a climate crisis, racial injustice. We can rise for a greater good of all humanity. We've been positioned as authorities over the land at, I think I lost that page. Nope, it's good. Of the great law of peace under the words of the Ganawida and Hiawatha and Jugusese. It was established that generations of children would unify under their mothers through the clan system. The clan system was already established prior to the coming of the great law, which structures our systems of chiefs. The peacemaker took the sisterhood and put the brotherhood with it, and they were supposed to work in tandem together. In his speech, when those first 11 chiefs were condoled, he said their authority would come from the women. The land will belong to the women. Therefore, any decision about the land will come from the women. And so with that, I just want to just give you a teaser, I guess you would call it, a little crumb of what is to be seen in here. And as the work goes on, the matrilineage of our people, seeing the brilliance of including women's voices in political arenas and also into decision making. And when the Europeans got here many generations ago, they thought it was a spectacle. They didn't think a woman could have a political thought. But here we are, in a time when the landscape is changing. And I certainly encourage women. I don't take anything away from the men at all. After all, my husband is here, and he drove me here. So he certainly contributed to this event. And I do have sons and grandsons. So, I really think men are sexy. And without them, well, life wouldn't happen. That's true. So I totally didn't make notes like Loretta did about what to say here today, and I'm not as seasoned and prepared as my elder sisters here, and I kind of draw a blank in moments like this, and there's only this one tune in my head that keeps coming and coming, and it's like 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover. And I'm like, I think I'm supposed to say something wise here and something. But anyways, that's life in the trenches of real work, and you have to have some humor with it. Otherwise, you're just going to dissipate into like stress, and you will crumble quickly. So in the Native world, we use a lot of humor as a medicine. So I just want to acknowledge all of you who are here. Yaweha.
Hello, Louise. I've had the honor and privilege to work alongside Louise and learn from her and be a mom to my children who have gone through rites of passage with Louise and all of the relatives who come together to help our families out. And I wanted to just say that sometimes we plan for sunshine and it's just a pouring monsoon in the middle of the night, and there's things that you can't plan for. And sometimes it looks like chaos, but out of that chaos is these seeds and these nuggets of the most brilliant ancestral information and knowledge and know-how. The know-how is very important. And through Ohologo, which is a word that we use to refer to under the husk, is Louise's thinking and let's do it, do-itness of this is how she sees it, and we all just do it. And in the doing of it, we realize how brilliant it is, because we don't realize we're all going to end up in a tight circle together, one arm's length away from relatives that we maybe never even have talked to before. Or maybe we work in the same office and we never had a meal together. Or maybe they're our neighbor and we didn't really like them. So we're all there because of our kids. And we do this complicated math problem of, for every adolescent who comes through Ohologo, they want them to have 4 adult helpers. Well, can you imagine how many people come on the last day for the feast? That's the real brilliance of that. It's not to say, oh, every weekend I gotta make soup for all these kids. And it's a gift because we are doing it together. And I wanted to ask Louise to share a little bit about part of Ohologo that we do with the young teenage girls that you call Awakening the Seeds.
Well, you know, I also want to, I call it the Awakening of the Seeds, which addresses her new body, her changing body at a time of adolescence when she comes into the cycling with her grandmother Moon. And we always address it in terms of your relationship with the environment. And it is the moon that pretty much tugs on all our polarities in our human body, and it is her that not only controls the waters, but also pulls from the earth all our nourishment and all our nurturing. So the moon plays a vital role in just human development, and it is her that signals when it's time for a young girl to come into her bleeding time. So there's this particular attention that I do and I give to that particular area of the young girl's body, who could be either 12, 13, 14, or even 15, and I kneel in front of her. And then I position, like Loretta had talked about, the 4 directions. So I put her mother to the left of her, which is close to her heart. I put the grandmother, if there's a grandmother, to the right, and then I put an auntie at the back. So there's a generation of 4 women surrounding this 13 or 14-year-old girl. And then I asked for permission if I can put my hands on her hips. And then we sing the ancient seed songs that our Jizo, our sky woman, brought with her from the sky world in the story of our Genesis. And what we do is we try and bring that attention of the young girl down to that special place from which life will begin. But I also recognize that not only a 14-year-old girl stands before me, but that she's already a grandmother, because within her body is already her grandchildren. And that's how sometimes, you can see 7 generations already in front of you. And then I asked the mother to address her daughter and share with her a birth story that perhaps, or a story when she was a little girl that she never heard before. And so when the mother completes that, we're all bawling our eyes out. And by the time it gets to the grandmother, and the grandmother's kind of on her way to ascending to higher places. And so it's words of wisdom that she's going to leave for her granddaughter. And, this sister of mine over here always said culture happens inside the practice. You can sit and talk about it all day, but if there's no application to it, then it's just words. So you really got to get on the ground and you know, I've certainly made my mistakes, but, you know, and I've certainly cried a lot of tears over the reconstruction and the rebuilding of our puberty right within our community. I've even had to step into the place of men and been told it's none of my business. But I had sons, and I had to persevere and stand in the place of men when men were not able to help our sons. But now I'm glad to say I have a whole team behind me, and I even have men as part of the work to help our sons transition. And it is a ritual of transition from being that young boy to being a young man, and to understand his sexuality, and to also to learn how to put his hands on a woman. And there's a whole nother ceremony about that. And so this awakening the seeds is really about helping the young girl to recognize how sacred that door is, how very sacred it is. So in a time when what do you call them people? The judges are reversing Roe v. Wade, you know, like a woman to the right to her own body and her own choices. I start right there to let this girl know she's the most powerful thing on this planet, and that she is the power behind her own body and her own choices and her right to be a mother or to not be. And that's nobody else's business, and it shouldn't be legislated. And if she truly understood, if we can teach them at that age to truly understand the power of her body, she would not need the intervention of a doctor or medical procedure. She could call on nature and stand between the power of the earth and the power of the sky and the power of our grandmother moon, and shed that gently and not have it be poked and prodded. So I really try and bring that girl's mind down to that very special place. And I talk about it like a beautiful field of freshly fallen snow, just virgin snow. Nobody's ever walked on it before. And I talk to this little girl and I say, you know, be that. And be selective about who walks on that freshly fallen field of snow. Don't let there be many tracks. Make it be few, you know? So to me, build the integrity of that young girl at 12 and 13, not at 30, you know? So it's really important, these teachings, when I do the Awakening the Seeds, is that I try and connect her womb to her mind and to her heart, so that she really recognizes that she's not detached from her body, and that it's all one collective piece. Nyawa.
Now, Louise, I think that leads us right into the question that I had for Gudji, which was to share about some of your midwifery work over the last decades and how you tie this circle into that work.
It was my midwifery work that brought me to this moment, and in my relationship with these two, Loretta, afraid of Bear Cook, is my sister-in-law. And Louise Herne, Wakérakats, is a clan mother in my Ganyanga longhouse. I remember when she was just a little girl, and to see her grow into the leadership that she carries has been one of the privileges and joys of my life, both for Wakérakats and Ampetolutawi, Loretta, afraid of Bear Cook. We all carry names that come from a consciousness of the connection and relationship that you've heard in their stories. The richness, the embodiment of knowledge for women and young girls of age. The primary marker of that transition into a new state of being and consciousness usually happens around the first pregnancy. And as the founding Indigenous midwife of the first freestanding Indigenous birthing center in all of Canada at Six Nations, Ontario, when we had our first client in that space to sit in one of the rooms of the birthing center with all Indigenous students, midwifery students who were being taught inside of their community. It was truly a room of our own, a space of our own. And as we began to work with the community women, I realized it's too late already at prenatal intake. The knowledge that this young woman needs to have should have been invested in her at puberty. And the work that both of these leaders are doing in our communities to make that come alive, to me, is Indigenous midwifery. It's not just the moment of a baby being born, which is a profound, deeply spiritual moment, and at the same time acknowledging the medical reality of it, but integrating who we are, what we know, how our kinship families still survive in villages. The stories are powerful. It's how we teach them. And through the work of my brother, Tom Cook, Loretta's husband, who is the president of our genealogical society at Akwesasne, to be able to go back through the matriline, this concept of woman is the first environment. And I'm not even speaking of the pregnant woman or the mother. I'm speaking of the grandmother generations back. She's the one who carries the biomarkers that are inherited through the generations. Pregnancy is a transgenerational act. So finding through the genealogical research of my own family, our matriline goes from the Kahnawake Mohawk community across the river from Montreal. My grandmother, Sagagohe Jacobs Montour, her mother was Julia Ann Jemison. Julia Ann Jemison was the first school teacher at Kahnawake who came from 6 Nations, from a family of 10 or 12 children. Her mother, my great-great-grandmother, was Julia Ann Garlow. And she stands out in the family histories of 6 Nations because she was married to Chief James Jemison, a Cayuga Turtle Clan wampum holder in the Longhouse there at Kahnawake, or 6 Nations. And he is the grandson of the Seneca captive, Mary Jemison. And while Mary Jemison is not part of my matriline, she's part of my genealogy. And her story, I'm sure those of you with white hair have run into the story of the captive of the 12-year-old Mary Jemison, who married a Seneca, and their line populates our Haudenosaunee world. Jan Longboat, who isn't here with us, she's about 85 years old, an elder, a remarkable leader in 6 Nations in the work of recovering a generation of adult women who went to the Mushhole boarding school, the oldest boarding school in Canada. The kind of residential school that came out of the policy conversations that were spoken about earlier. The damage done to both the boys and the girls who had their names removed at the door, anything they showed up with from home was taken from them, and they were tattooed with numbers. Sound familiar? And so I've sat in the work of Jan Longboat hearing the stories of these women and what they endured. And the beauty of it has been through the kind of stories, the rites of passage, the ceremonial, that were also taken from us by missionaries, by the belief that who Indigenous people are has no value or purpose. And here we are at a time of existential dread and angst, at a number of critical moments in our history on this planet as human beings, that even though you sit here as an audience and you can only hear, it's really in the knowing of the connected knowing and the ability to be present with your whole body, to pray with your whole body, not just your mind or your spirit. And that's what the Sundance is about. That's what Oglala is about. Our word for family is Hawajile, that comes from the word Ohwajile, that is fire. And our speakers will comment how from these policies that took from us the original instructions given to us in our creation stories by creator beings, that it's only in the embodiment of the knowledge that you can really understand its significance, its profound depth, and its purpose. And it happens at the level of family, at the level of clan, that when that fire is disrupted and the logs are thrown askew, that our work has been to bring those ashes together, to bring those sticks back into a blazing flame. What unites us is the love of our children and grandchildren, wahe. Every one of us in here wants healthy children. And yet, as one of my generation who came into the world at the hands of my own grandmother, who delivered me in her big white iron bed in the reservation in 1952, who mentored and stood on the earth with her 18 children delivered by her mother at home, 15 of whom survived infancy. There were teachings, there were ways of being inside of how they moved that made me love elder people, but particularly women elders like my grandmother and like their grandmothers, and probably all of your grandmothers, that carried a wisdom beyond scientific definitions and principles and concepts to something right straight to the heart. And so using that energy and investing it in our women, that moment of birth, that's where the carrying of that seed, that fertilized seed, that's where peace begins. How she moves, how she's treated. The first language the child hears is in the linguistic patterns of the mother. The songs, the words said to them, the touches, all of that have to do with the beginning of where peace begins. And I know that birth in American society is laden with fear, except in those spaces where the midwives have the ability, the space, and the time to make an impact on our girls and their development, their behaviors, their thinking, their self-esteem. Jan Longboat, in her chapter, was asked, she was part of a national group selected by the government to go to the families across Canada of the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. As someone who had worked with the cohort of survivors of the residential school, bringing them to their voice. And she was asked, what's the core of the healing needed for the women and the girls? And she said, self-esteem. Self-esteem. That's what was taken in those boarding schools. Feeling that the feminine body is somehow the source of all evil in the world. There are actually people who don't examine their belief structure that leads back to that idea. But you can see from the discourse of Loretta and Wakérakats the way out of those dark places. And so the last thing I'll say about your question, Randy, is we learn our culture in the practice of it. It's not enough to read a book, although we do want you to buy and read this book. Because we wonder, how do we connect across the globe to other Indigenous women and their stories? And we already have gone a long way with that. But in doing midwifery in the communities, I would ask for the words that belong, because language has a niche in nature and in culture. And one word that I heard working with Wakérakats was the word Yewilogwas, that simply means she delivers or something like that. But in working in First Environment Collaborative and working with a woman, Marita Thompson, who teaches art and the language, painted a woman inside of a slippery elm tree and in the woods. And the slippery elm is the classic Mohawk medicine for birth. She takes that in the last trimester. And the Mohawk word for vagina, which is a Greek-Latin root that is the scabbard of the Roman soldier's sword. So violence is already woven into the language, the clinical language. So we use our language to talk to the girls, that the birth canal becomes tsia'kwa, it's slippery, which is more appropriate, don't you think, to reality? And so using the language to find our way home to our own bodies. This Marita had painted this image of a mother holding her infant in the bark of a slippery elm tree. And in the process of coming to this image, she described to me, Gaji, you know how in the fall the rains come and knock the leaves off the trees that have fallen on wet areas and creating a seasonal stream, and it's covered with leaves? She said, I see a woman, because the language is metaphorical. I see a woman walking into the forest and kneeling down in front of this stream covered with leaves and moving those leaves apart from the waters, and I see her pulling the baby from the water or a dark, wet place. And as Loretta said, the west, the color is black, from where the thunders and lightning, chaos, and the model for chaos is embryogenesis. So that idea of pulling the baby out of the water, out of the earth, or a dark, wet place is truly the work of an indigenous midwifery that we've gone a long way over the last 40 years in elevating, especially in the Canadian provinces, where now, up in James Bay, the Cree communities of Chisasibi, Mistissini, and Waskaganish, where I just visited, they're training 6 young Cree women in the community with elder midwives and a midwife who is registered with the College of Midwives of Ontario that I helped found many years ago in the 1990s. And the Regroupement des Sages-Femmes du Québec, who we are deeply connected to founding, who are working with the Cree communities so that these young women, after a 4-year on-site training, will be registered at the college of these different provinces. So it's possible to renew, to heal, to recover, to regenerate through the women. And that's the moment we're in all of our human history. And so the last thing I'll mention is moving this work towards matrilineal world making. And we're going to do that using the title of a song by a dear friend from Novo Foundation, who is the sole funder of the work of spirit-aligned leadership, to cultivate the lived experiences, the voices, the wisdom of Indigenous women elders, such as you've been privileged to hear here. He uses his song is called Embrace for Impact. And if you can't relate to that theme, think of living in Asheville, North Carolina in the last week. Embracing for impact. So we're here to embrace you, to share with you our hopes and our dreams, our voices, our lived experiences, to strengthen you as well, because we need our allies. We've arrived at a wonderful moment, a challenging time, but we can embrace through love and attention for impact. Daneto, thank you for listening.
Yawa, Mom.
Yawa, my girl.
So we're going to open it up for you all to ask some questions or share some thoughts or feelings with these ladies. Don't be shy. And if you need help with the mic, just raise your hand and I'll come on over to you. And after that, we're going to have a short closing remark, and we'll have some time to get together and talk in the hallway for one-on-one conversations if you like.
When can we buy the books?
Where? Oh, the question was, where can we buy the book? And there are books for sale in the hallway on the exit.
I always like to ask, first question, as leaders, as leaders of your peoples, I just want to ask about fun. What is your favorite sport?
Girls lacrosse.
Girls lacrosse.
Dancing.
Can't do it without you,
Dancing around a tree.
Over here.
First of all, I just want to say what an absolute privilege it is to sit with you and to hear your stories, the sacred stories, and your service. So in this place of remembering the original instructions, do you believe that there's a way to access that information through consciousness, through other forms of remembrance, even if it hasn't been directly passed on, like some these other channels of remembering?
Is that for anybody specific or? Okay, I think I'm going to take that question on. In terms of consciousness, you know, the way I think about it and what has happened here on this hemisphere, there's been a crime committed, a big one, and there's a karmic debt that needs to be paid. And so when we're in this great time of shifting consciousness, I think it's really important to, you know, as we begin to see each other, perhaps maybe for the first time beyond our divisions, is that the only way to a clear consciousness is to tell the truth. Tell the goddamn truth. And I say that fiercely. And also fierce in my generosity, too. And the reason why I say that, because we're headed for this time where we're all in peril with this planet. So in order to shift that consciousness, we have to tell the truth. And we have to bring truth and vitality. And you know, history was lived by two different sides, and it can't be just told from one side anymore. It has to tell the living history of both sides. And in this country, who glorifies war as its history, will always be at war. But until we shift the consciousness toward peace, then perhaps maybe we have a chance. And so, to me, we have, once we resurrect and we bring reciprocity to truth, which means now you're here on our side for the first time, then we can not focus on paying that debt, but we can raise the consciousness beyond the karma when there's no more karma left to live.
May I share? I'd like to share my mother's philosophy, I suppose. My mother was a member of the International Council of 13 Indigenous Grandmothers, and she was Beatrice Long Visitor Holy Dance. She was a big influence in my life, in how I've been trying to step into her shoes is with my sister. My sister and I, she takes one side of the shoe and I take the other. But at the same time, she had a saying, and she told us, don't be afraid. You're going to be out there with many, many people, and you're all going to arrive at the same place and time if you work together. And she said, have courage, because without courage, there is no justice. Without justice, there is no freedom. And without freedom, there is no peace. So that's what we put on her headstone, because she told it to us. So I just share it with you. You have to have courage. We all have to. So I leave that with you. Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much. I want to say, first of all, for being here and sharing your stories. I've been so moved. I can't wait to go by and read your book. You said so many things that have really touched me. I'm a mother of 2 daughters. I live in a community, a neighborhood of houses. I'm part of a school district. I'm part of a spiritual community. And in all of these areas, I see, particularly I'm thinking of the spiritual community that I'm in, such a disconnect among the women. I see it echoed in all of those areas, though. And I don't think I'm alone in seeing that. I think it's common this day and age, this culture, I'm not sure. And I've long thought about how to repair that. I mean, how to go from such disconnect to creating connection amongst the women, particularly. So, in that very broad question, I wonder if you have any advice.
I want to jump on this again. I guess for me, just simply stop being in a religion that tells you that woman was born from the rib of man.
I hate to follow Louise, but I wanted to say something on that. So I always draw on my experience as a mom and auntie within Ohologo, working with Louise every week on a parent side, and as I was helping to organize for a time. And the idea of putting it aside for your kids is so powerful. It's hard to explain because it takes the focus off of yourself and it puts it on your kids. And everybody, that's the unity part. We're all coming together for the sake of our kids. This is something we can all agree on. So when we say in the practice, I mean, there are 1.5 million activities that we do over this 3, 4, 5 month process. And they all mean something. And it's exhausting and it's a lot of work, but to show your kids that you're showing up for them every day, to show your nieces or your nephews that you're showing up for them, it really does something to you. It puts you as the women in a very vulnerable place of kinship when you're being comforted when your kids are fasting for 3 days, 4 days. How can you not come together in a very vulnerable way? You've been through it as an auntie, helping comfort someone whose kids are going through something. And then when it's your turn, they're all there. And you have to keep at it. It's not your kids are done now, I'm out. And that actually happened to me. I did that. And it's a big regret because those relationships continue. You have to create those situations. It creates the memory that creates the power. That's the fire. You're talking about building up a fire. How do you do that in real life? It starts with something. It starts with some energy, animation, intention. So it's just something that in the practice, that is 100%. You have to do it. You have to go through it and not think about what comes out on the other side, but just go through it and accept that. And it is very powerful, and it does create kinship relationships between women.
Greetings. I'm Baratunde Thurston, and I'm a proud buyer of this book. As we all shall be. It's going to be my gift to many people this year. Son of Arnita and Arnold, honored to be in your presence. The world feels like it's dying, and it's being born anew. And it's hard to imagine better ambassadors, emissaries, counselors, and leaders for that new birth than you. I'm curious what you have seen, felt, heard, sensed beyond this contiguous set of land in North, South America, Turtle Island, but across the world. You're in such community and communication, and I'd love to hear some of that good news that's echoing what you're finding right here. Thank you.
That's a big conversation, isn't it? And we are engaging that conversation intergenerationally, multi-generationally. I'm happy to have in this room 2 of my children, Waiahawi Fitch and Anundux Barreiro, who work in our communities and in the extended networks of our families, to build on the kinds of things that have been spoken about here. And in leadership, one has to expand beyond your own comfort zone. I mean, in terms of what the young woman over here asked about working with women, match like with like. And Loretta's mom taught, first, learn how to get along. Learn how to get along. Get your ego out of the way. There are medicines to help you do that. I'm part of an Indigenous advisory group for the state of Colorado who are wanting Indigenous consultation around the use of sacred plant medicines in their marketing. And so you can imagine the tensions and the challenges on both ends. But yes, we're in the sixth extinction. Mother Earth has her cycle. The forces that make up the universe are changing. Some are even confused. But I think about an elder who's no longer with us, who took me to the Cattaraugus Longhouse for their midwinter ceremonies, which is a ceremony of renewal of the medicine societies, and a renewal of connection at that time, the first day, to the wind itself. And it was an amazing ceremony held before the sun rises. A ceremonial fire is made, original tobacco is put in the fire. Its translation, according to my sister Wakérakats, that activity of putting that oyunkwa, the original tobacco, in the fire, it translates to, it hits and it opens. And each one of us has to be opened. And then Seneca men coming out of the forest singing the dawn songs that are asking the winds to go around us. Don't knock the trees on us or our homes. A direct communication and contact with the forces of nature is possible from a sincere heart and a continuing connection. It's not something, oh, I think I'll do this. I went to a workshop. I'm going to try this. Sit on the side of a mountain and meditate. And I mean, that's one way to approach it. But the consistency of that approach. And so we use multiple knowledge systems that we share with Indigenous relatives across this hemisphere. And across our Haudenosaunee lands and across the tribal, First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities of North America. We're building a network of Indigenous women's voices and action. Because we're on the ground in ways inside of extended kinship communities that you are not. Your original instructions come from a different place on Mother Earth. The story of Sky Woman that she mentioned belongs to an ecosystem, not just a culture. The Great Lakes ecosystem is the story of a pregnant woman who fell from a celestial world through a hole in that world that was made when a tree was uprooted, analogous to an extinction of a way of being. And so it's written into the human experience and to creation, this process of death and rebirth, death and rebirth. We all know it. We all have loved ones who are no longer with us, and we all know that this is a shared experience of humanity. We're not here forever. And each one of you has a purpose. And had I been your midwife, I could share with you some of those details. But regardless, you each have a purpose within this concept of how do we manage moving forward. And the first thing is to acknowledge life force wherever it shows itself, which is in everything. One of our almost 87 legacy leaders is an elder in British Columbia of the Lil'wat people. She's responsible for the decade of Indigenous languages at the United Nations right now. And she was in a group that asked, how do you describe this connection that we're creating here? And she thought about it. How would you say connection in her language? And she said, in my language, there's a root to every word. It's an image. And we add prefixes and suffixes to express it. And she came upon that feeling of connection in her language, and she said it and translated it. The word for connection in Haitsuk is belly button. Unexpected, isn't it? But when you think about it, the life force moves through our cord connecting us to our mother, and it's that life force that brought us here. And it's why we pay attention to the products of conception in an Indigenous care of birth. It's all sacred, that cord, the placenta. In the old days, the Mohawk midwives would raise the sack to the window and divine from the patterns in the sac of the placenta the road of the child's life. Imagine being that connected. And so connection and disconnection begin with oneself. And these ceremonies they're talking about are pathways to oneself, to one's thwarted or distorted ego because of the society we've all been exposed to every day, day after day, and it's changing so quickly because of technology. One friend says, if you don't use your imagination, someone else will. So begin there, use your own imagination. And then imagine with others, and begin with your belly button.
Somebody over there.
I have a question with kind of like two ends to it. What is it, and it's for all of you or anyone that wishes to answer. What is it that you hope to see this book accomplish? Particularly since you said it's not enough to read a book. And then on the other side, what might worry you to see as an unintended consequence from publishing these stories? So, Kasuk.
Wow, that's a big question. I guess the book, as in any book, is a message. And the message is that it's something different. To be able to look at something different, something old that can be made new again. And I guess to have meaning. I'm hoping that we rethink ourselves as a human species, and I hope that's what the book is made. I'm hoping that the words is able to do to help us rethink ourselves as human beings. Because it is a message, and again, it's words, but words come and go. It's something you have to feel and you have to embody and embrace. But there is another way than the trajectory we're on right now. And that's what I'm hoping that the book does, is to be able to show you a different way that has a little bit more meaning. And I guess the other thing that I would be afraid that the book would do is that I won't have a life anymore after this. That I'll be so inundated and flooded with requests that I won't even be able to do my work anymore and get lost in the need in the world. And I can't lose my family over that. So I'm hoping that you take it and you embrace it and embody it. And I guess for me, I'm just too legit to quit. And I'm getting like this.
Yeah. We're running. Go ahead, Auntie, and then we're going to save some time to have some mixing in the back.
So what I'm hoping that this book is going to do is to reconnect everybody, all you grandparents sitting here, and all of you who are mothers and fathers, and that there is hope about how that happens. And we give you tons and tons of information. You just have to buy this book. You just got to. I want to say to you that that young woman over there that was asking that question, I'm 76, and I get down on the floor with my 6-year-old grandson. And I'm hoping that those of you can do that. I have a hard time getting up. He has to help me up. He asked me the other day, and it's so profound for me, that this little 6-year-old has got something in him that's just so bright. He asked me, he said, Unchi, which is our word for grandmother, Unchi, how do you say dinosaur in our language? And I thought about it. I pulled it out of my grandma bag, and I said, Unktechi. And then he stood there and he said, Unktechi is the word for dinosaur. How do you say Tyrannosaurus Rex? So be prepared. When you begin this process for regeneration and redoing, rejuvenation, reconnecting, read the book. There's tons and tons of advice in there. There's so much in it that we share, that all of my sisters together, you know, I think I wish that they were all here. You know, I wished we could have shared every one of our Circle One, because there's been some profound, profound things that have happened. We've been able to manifest so much by offering what we know. So thank you.
So with those words from Auntie Loretta, we're going to close it up and
I'll be right behind you.
okay, and invite you all to meet Loretta and Louise and Gudgy at the and to do a book signing as well, if you wish. And Patty has some closing remarks. Here she is.
Right. I got it.
Oh, you got it. Okay.
Can everybody hear me?
Put it by your mouth.
Put it by my mouth.
Yes.
Oh,
Whatever.
right here. On behalf of Mohawk consultations. Huh? Boy, I'm really bad at this. Okay. Thank you. All right. Thank you for everything. To our speakers, I better keep my head straight too. For gathering here at Mohawk to share your powerful lives and memories. And thank you to Gucci Cook, with José and Randi Barreiro, the book's editors, Guani Press, the publisher, the Spirit Aligned Leadership Program for the direction and inspiration, to Mohawk Mountain House, and my family. Basically, to all those people, thank you for creating the space to bring this book to us all. Thank you for all present here in this room because, you know, this is a unique moment. This kind of inaugural book launch is not going to be the same in every other rooms where the book is being talked about. You are here now today to listen to these wise people, these wise women, and thank you for being here. I have one more quote because I'm an academic and I have to quote. Am I right? To match Canadian fiction writers Louise Penny's words in her 2018 novel, Kingdom of the Blind, in order to fit the context of today's program. Here's what she says at the end of the book. And I changed it to match us here today. Today's gathering is about, and I'm quoting, the common yearning for community, for belonging. It's about kindness, acceptance, gratitude, and the choices we make. We're very fortunate, aren't we, to have found each other. And I would add to that quote, here at Mohawk. Thank you. The last part of today's program is now open for you to mingle, to talk to each other, to meet each other, and to purchase your signed book copies.